Okay, good afternoon from European point of time, or good morning from Boston East Coast point of time from Adis Jugo and Marc Anderson. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Attis. How are you?
Good, great. I was actually looking forward to this webinar quite so much because I think we are going to answer some important questions, show some important stuff, and have some good fun for the next 1 hour.
I hope so.
As people are coming to the webinar, I see numbers are increasing more and more as we speak. I was actually the last weekend in Brussels, in Belgium, at another really great SharePoint Saturday, one of the largest SharePoint Saturdays in Europe. And believe it or not, Marc, the predominating topic was citizen developers.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that Mike Fitzmaurice did a keynote about that.
He did a keynote on citizen development, and there were at least 4 more sessions which had citizen development and citizen developers in focus, including my own session on that one. So obviously this thing that we are going to talk about today is a thing.
It's been a thing for a long time, but everyone's realizing it's a thing.
Okay, let's now officially open this webinar. Hello everyone, my name is Adis Jugo, on my other side is Marc Anderson. I need to say one story. The first time I met Marc in person, after knowing him for quite some years from his work on SharePoint Services, was in 2012. You remember, Marc? I think it was in Redmond, actually.
Yep, I do think I do remember that.
And Marc, who is a very dear guy and a very good friend, had that look telling me, like, didn't I tell you? Client-side development. You guys all guys were compiling your code. Didn't I tell you? And that was actually the time when Microsoft announced SharePoint 2013 and add-in model, which was fully client-side, and that actually writing code in C# and compiling it and deploying it to GUC should be considered as the thing from the past.
Well, things have definitely changed over the years, haven't they? We sort of come at this from from different perspectives based on our own experience.
Yeah. So this, I leave you to introduce yourself, Marc. Even if I don't think that you don't need that much of an introduction, but let's do these formalities.
All right. Well, let's see if we can switch over to my screen.
Yeah, let me make you a presenter. Both Marc and I are developers, so we are not really good at this WebEx stuff, just for you guys to know. But we'll manage somehow. Are you a presenter now?
I think so. Let's see.
Yes, you are.
All right. And you should see a slide with my name at the top.
Yeah.
Well, hi there again, everybody. I'm Marc Anderson. I pretty much have been doing SharePoint work for a huge part of my career, believe it or not. It's been around that long. Going all the way back to, I actually went to Redmond and sat in a meeting about Tahoe, so I can claim that lineage. But I've also done a lot of other stuff, so I bring some different perspectives to SharePoint and Office 365 than some people who've been working with it. And I think Attis is right. I've always been a little bit of an iconoclast in how I solve problems, and I've done a lot of client-side development over the years. But one of the things that I feel really strongly about is enabling end users to solve their own problems, and that's a big part of what citizen development skills are all about. So that's why Attis and I thought it would be a great idea to do a webinar where we talked around how we see citizen developers solving problems, based on my perspective on the world and on Attis's perspective on the world from skybow. So Attis, do you want to talk a little bit about who you are?
Yep, just a little bit. As Marc, I'm also Microsoft MEP, but like more something the most valuable professional, which means that we do stuff that Microsoft likes from time to time. Sometimes they don't. For Office servers and services, which was previous SharePoint MVP skill. Since I am a developer and come from this development background, I am also MVP for Office development. I'm also, since quite some time in IT, I actually started professionally working in this industry since '91, so it's also been some years now. With SharePoint since 2003, I actually skipped Tahoe and I skipped 2001. So I jumped in basically on a totally crazy and ridiculous way. Jumped in the SharePoint bandwagon, and this is where I am now, 14 years later. I'm working for skybow. You will see the skybow logo during all this presentation. Skybow is the host of this webinar. Skybow is a company which actually makes a platform for citizen developers to actually build the solutions, and professional developers to cut down their time in doing boring, repetitive things to a great amount, and to actually focus on the problem, solving the problems, and creating the solutions. I'm living in Germany, but I've been born in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. My blog post is there. This is with Skybow. I'm director of the product technology, which means I am part of our architecture team, but as well working with a lot of our partners and people who are actually building solutions, being citizen developers. Marc, can you just switch the slide?
Yep, there we go. Oh, sorry, clicking on the wrong thing. There we go.
There you go. So basically, this is what Skybow does. We are a platform for building. This is the green question mark on the totally left side, for building solutions on top of SharePoint Online or SharePoint on premises on the client side, but also in the business of helping you transition from InfoPath or Access Services or Lotus Notes and Lotus Domino to SharePoint Online and SharePoint on premises. This is basically what we are. We are a platform for citizen developers and for professional developers to create their solution. With this, I'm giving up on introducing Skybow or myself and giving back to you, Marc.
Thanks, Adis. And by the way, my marketing department would be very upset with me if I didn't say that I have my own company in Boston called Sympraxis Consulting with Julie Turner, most incredible, awesome Julie Turner, who is just a lot of fun to work with, and we're trying to do as good work with clients as much as we possibly can. I forgot to mention that.
I see your marketing department actually being present in this webinar.
that had no impact on my speaking.
Okay.
So I think one of the things we want to talk about is, what is this idea of citizen developers? Adis was saying before we really got started that at SharePoint Saturday Brussels this past weekend, there were 4 or 5 sessions that talked about citizen developers. This to me is not something that's new. Excuse me. As long as there have been computers, there have been people who have been called something other than professional developers. In fact, when I started writing code, there was no such thing as the term professional developer. We were all just programmers. It wasn't as elitist back then. But back in 2009, Gartner came up with this term, citizen developers. I actually thought it was even older than that, but the concept is certainly older than that. The idea is that citizen developers sit somewhere inside a department other than IT generally, and they build things that department or that group of people really need to solve their business problems. I don't like very much to call it the business, because if IT people don't think that they're part of the business, then there's obviously a sort of a disconnect there. One of the things that I think is very interesting about the definition that Gartner uses is that, and I've tried to bold it there. I'm not quite sure if it shows up very well, but the tools and methods that these citizen developers used are sanctioned by corporate IT. I actually find that in probably a large percentage of the time, these activities are not sanctioned by corporate IT. In fact, they're unknown to corporate IT and often are sort of end runs around corporate IT, because those people in the business departments can't get stuff done by IT. IT isn't always the most helpful channel for them to solve their problems. I think that's a sad state of affairs, and you'll probably hear me say a few more things about that because I think it's something that has to change. The tools that we're getting in SharePoint and Office 365 these days have sometimes help us solve things from a citizen developer standpoint, and sometimes are a hindrance, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I think that for many years now, and Adis was talking about my SPServices library, for many years now there have been people out there who have been building solutions that just plain work. They get the job done, they solve problems. The people who are sitting in those departments, as I said, are perhaps the best suited to understand the problems they're solving. You don't need a business analyst to translate the business need, because the person building the thing is the person who's going to use it. They live right with the end users of the solution. Usually their day job is not writing code or building systems. They're not in the IT department, so they're not paid, their salary is not directed straight at writing code or architecting systems. But that doesn't mean that they don't have capabilities around this stuff. I've worked with people in a marketing department who have a computer science degree. They're as well trained as I am, if not better, because I actually don't have a computer science degree. But it's not their primary focus. They've learned how to solve problems with tools like Excel and Access, like Gartner calls out here, but also they may have built very sophisticated things over the course of their career and can bring those skills to bear. Unfortunately, this partnership between IT and people embedded in the business, it tends to be a weak one, especially in large organizations. There's too much of a sort of brick wall between the silos. What I always love to see is when IT has, and I use the term IT loosely, you may call it IT in your organization or some other set of letters that mean the people who do the techie stuff. Wherever there's a successful partnerships, a collaboration between IT and the people in all the other departments, I see the businesses or the organizations that act that way succeeding in many ways that organizations that don't have that don't. And then finally, Mike Fitzmaurice and I actually were talking at SharePoint Saturday Monaco, which was quite a nice trip. And we came up with the term digital handyman. If you think about it, you don't always hire a professional to solve a problem. When you have something that you need to fix inside your house, you may decide that you're going to do a little work yourself on the toilet, or you're going to oil the hinges on a door. If it's a little beyond your own capabilities, you might hire a handyman. You don't necessarily need a professional plumber or a professional carpenter. And you may get totally great work out of them, and that might solve your problem. It's a little bit cheaper. It's definitely a little bit easier. And then if you have really heavy-duty work, you go and you do hire those professional people. The same idea here. There's not this sort of magical boundary between somebody who's able to write code and somebody who isn't able to write code. Everything is really more of a spectrum. And so these digital handymen who live in the organization are often just incredible resources for the people who need stuff to get done. So that's a lot of talking for one slide, but I wanted to really sort of nail what we're thinking of as citizen developers. Interestingly enough, modern SharePoint on some levels reduces the developer surface area. It gives citizen developers a little bit less to work with. There are some good things that are happening though, and I think that it's important to focus on those good things. There are some capabilities that Microsoft is building into the platform that people like me have had to build for years by hand. So for instance, the upcoming column formatting capability, which I've been playing around because I get to test things a little bit earlier than everybody else, is an awesome capability where in the past I might have created a list view from scratch just to highlight things using some coloring or graphics or something like that. So Microsoft is building in some capabilities that we've often had to build. So we're getting the sort of the level of the platform continues to increase, where citizen developers may actually just be end users who are checking some boxes or clicking some things so that they can enhance the UI for for their own use. The new tools like Power Apps, Flow, I mentioned column formatting, other things can be a little bit less about development and a little bit more about configuration. Again, that's a sort of a distinction that it should be blurry. There's a lot of gray in between, but we're getting some really sophisticated tools that I don't think are end user tools. I think it's always interesting to say that things like SharePoint Designer or Power Apps are end user tools, but I really don't think they are. They're power user, citizen developer, low-end development kind of tools. And if you need more oomph, then you end up turning to so-called professional developers. The cons on some of this stuff is that in modern SharePoint, it's sometimes hard to get client-side customizations into those pages. The SharePoint framework is really our main entry point to do customizations or do that client-side development sort of work, and that's beyond what many citizen developers are going to be capable of doing. We can't just jam an HTML file into a content editor web part to build a new application anymore. I think Microsoft still is occasionally taking the develop to solve approach with a lot of things. Microsoft has traditionally been all about development on top of this platform, and I think we still have some of that. We still have, oh, we can just write an Azure function to take care of that, and you know, hook into the webhooks, and then you'll be all set. That's too complicated for many citizen developers, so I think that's unfortunate. I think that the tools on the pros column are actually starting to really attack that well. So when we start to build a solution on top of SharePoint especially, one of the first things we want to do is figure out, well, how are we going to store our data? What do we need to, what data do we need to capture and manipulate in order to make this a useful system? In lots of cases, you just create some lists and libraries and then you're done because the standard UIs are fine. And in many cases, we have to go a little bit further than that. So we use lists and libraries sort of like relational tables, and I'll show you what I mean when I do a bit of a demo. We set up content types using site columns, so we have some reusability. We use lookup columns so that we have better data consistency. We may store JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, data in multiple lines of text columns so that we can get some sort of multi-dimensional data stored in single line items. So there's some tricks that we can use, and we can really start to use those lists and libraries to go further than SharePoint really lets us go. There's the absolute caveats around all of this. When we run into this, and this is where some of the professional developers might say, yeah, but you're going to screw everything up. You know, we may do some things that sort of paint ourselves into a corner. Managed metadata can be difficult to deal with when we're writing client-side code. There's a 5,000 item limit that's a threshold in views, which makes total sense. There's no real reason that we'd want to show more than 5,000 items in a view, but when we're writing client-side code, sometimes we need to look at or summarize more than 5,000 items, and we may have to do some work to get around that. We can use some caching schemes as we're building solutions so that we can speed things up, so that, you know, as data volumes go up, the system doesn't just start grinding to a halt. Again, something that we need to think of from a, you know, when I have my professional developer hat on, that's something I worry about a lot. Flat tables in the forms of lists and libraries are great, but sometimes you end up with too many of them, and so you have to think about how you're going to best store your data. Then we want to think about, well, what's the UI going to look like? You know, how do we want to present the data that we've got in those lists and libraries? Often we'll be sort of joining data from multiple lists and libraries together, like SharePoint does out of the box, but in different ways so that we can really give a tailored view to the data that makes sense based on the solutions we're trying to create, the problems we're trying to solve. Lots of times I like to look to the consumer web for inspiration. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there now that really looks great, and we can find some visual metaphors that work really well. We can find all kinds of fancy stuff, but I think oftentimes people go a little too far. They make things look so different than SharePoint that it's a jarring experience to sort of go into a solution and then go back out to SharePoint to do other stuff. Web developers know HTML and CSS. That's what SharePoint development is becoming. So we really need to think about how we can rough things out using HTML and CSS, and then layer in data binding or JavaScript to make it actually sort of behave, do things, as opposed to just display data. We may choose to use some development tools or development frameworks. So lots of citizen developers build stuff with JavaScript, and there's nothing wrong with just plain old JavaScript. You can get a lot done with that. But lots of times you might want to think about using a development framework. I've used Knockout, I've used Angular, I've certainly looked at some of the other ones. There's absolutely a learning curve to getting to the point where you can use some of these things, but over time, if you're the kind of citizen developer who's going to be building multiple solutions and you want some reusability or some organization around your code, and if you're a good citizen developer, you will start thinking about those things. You might want to look at some of these frameworks to actually help out. But don't worry about what's popular. That's not the point. When people ask the question, what development framework should I use, it's really the wrong question. You need to think about, what's your team's skills if it's not just you writing the solution. What do you know? What do you bring to the table from a knowledge perspective, and what's going to fit well with that? Understand your requirements well. Make sure you understand that the framework is going to provide you what you need. And then the other thing we can do is we can look at the SharePoint framework and watch where it's going, and know that if we use some of the same tool set, that we can build on, we can build what we need up to a point, and then if IT needs to take over, we can sort of slide things into the SharePoint framework. That collaboration, though, that often doesn't happen between citizen developers and IT is very important for that to be successful. So when we're building stuff as citizen developers, we can sometimes reach limits. In fact, this is sort of the danger zone, right? The citizen developer builds something that's really cool, wants IT help. IT doesn't have the budget, doesn't have the attention span, doesn't have the knowledge of what's been going on. But ideally, we can turn to IT for some assistance and collaboration, right? I'm stuck on this one thing. Could you guys help me with that? We could transfer the project all the way over to IT, which means that we sort of, as a citizen developer, you lose control of it potentially, but it might sort of get it to the point where it's like industrialized. It becomes bulletproof. It becomes a more instantiated solution. We can hire outside help. I make good money doing this. A lot of time I'm hired by people outside of IT because they need help that they can't get inside the company. I don't think that's a bad thing. Sometimes it's a little bit of an end run, but if there's a problem to solve, then it needs to be solved. And then finally, we can look at third-party tools, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this webinar with Attis. I think skybow is a very strong entrant in this contest, and third-party tools like skybow can really take you another huge step forward as a citizen developer from where you might be if you're writing pure code. And by code, I do mean usually JavaScript or other client-side code. So I'm gonna show a couple of things, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Adis to show some things that he's done. So what we've done here is I've taken a solution that I actually built for a client. And it's around sourcing. So if you think about working in a company, probably not a big one. This would not be a sourcing application for a huge company because it would be far too complex. You're tending to use things like SAP for that. But in a small to medium-sized company, you might have a situation where individual people need to come and request purchasing of things. And the sourcing department then would sort of manage those requests into orders. Those orders need to be managed through a process of placing the order, receiving the order, all that sort of stuff, and then people get what they need in order to do their job. So what you see here is sort of the home screen where you see my request. I'm an administrator, so I can see sort of everything here. But I can see any requests that I've placed, and then any requests that have been made recently in my location. So I can make sure that I don't order something that someone else has already asked for. Any one of these little requests, we can sort of hover over here and dig into a little bit of more detail of what that request is about. If you think about some of that new column formatting capability, we might be able to do some of this with that capability, which is pretty cool. And these hover things are a great way to sort of jam a lot more content into a single page. And this is a sort of a big single page application. I don't really have to leave this page too much in order to accomplish the things that I need to do. Though when I want to make a new request, I do, one of the things I like to do in solutions like this is just to use the out-of-the-box forms. I mean, they're simplistic, but they get the job done. I'm really looking forward to being able to use the Power Apps forms right in context like this, so that we can make them look a little bit nicer, maybe arrange the form a little bit better. But this is a basic form that certainly works to get the job done. We ask for some information from the user who's making the request, and when that's saved, then it's available or it's visible on that page, so that we can see what's been going on. From a sourcing perspective, from the person who, on the other side of things, the person who needs to place orders, one of the things we can do here is we can choose an order, or I'm sorry, choose a request, and you notice that just narrowed everything down to that particular vendor. We can't place an order across multiple vendors, so that makes pretty decent sense. So we select a number of requests, and we click the Assemble Order button, and you'll notice that now we have an order with those three requests as line items on that particular order. At a certain point, we're going to, we didn't integrate with any external systems. This particular client of mine has, hundreds of vendors, so there's no way we're going to integrate with their systems. What the sourcing people do is they go off and they place an order and then come back here and say, okay, that order has been placed. We expect that order to come on October 26th, and the order number for that vendor is 12345. We save it, and now it goes from an assembled order to a placed order. So that's an order that we're now waiting for it to actually come back, and then time goes by. We get some product in the door. We actually got, if we say we get this item on the 24th, we received 5 of them. I don't remember how many I ordered. We can add, put away in cabinet, whatever we need to do to tell the person who's requested it, and we save that. So now that item becomes purple, because purple's our sort of success color. That means that item has been received. So all in all, this works pretty well. You'll notice that as the volume has gotten a little bit larger, it's gotten a little ugly. We've actually switched UIs to go to a more card-based look, and the benefit of that is we sort of get not fully responsive, because SharePoint is not fully responsive, but we get a more responsive view of the stuff that's going on, and we can act on things a little bit more easily. So that's the basic idea. The code to do this, and I'm not going to go through a lot of code here. I'm actually doing a session on the Collab 365 conference on November 1st, where I go into this in a bit more detail. If you're interested, join that one. But the basic idea is that in that page, sorry, I'm going to go back to the browser. In this page, we have one content editor web part, and it's pointing to, sorry, I've got the go to webinar thing in the way every time I move around here. It's pointing to a single HTML file that really bootstraps the whole thing. So I've got this sourcing home.html file that loads into the page, and that pulls all of the code into the page that we need to get the job done. Let me go and load that. Sorry for the shifting back and forth. So sourcing home goes and loads a bunch of libraries that we need. This particular solution is built with Angular. I like Font Awesome for some of the icons, the little garbage cans, the little pluses and minuses, things like that. I use Moment.js to do date and time arithmetic. I'm using Angular UI, which has some bootstrap capabilities built into it, so that I have some, like that nice calendar picker is a nice piece of that. I'm using SPServices because calendar stuff is still very hard to do with REST endpoints. It's just not available in REST endpoints yet. There's a user voice item for that you could go and vote on. And basically this is just sort of loading a container into which I pour the rest of the application. Sourcing.js is the application code itself. That's sort of the business logic, the processing that makes this whole thing what the business actually needs. And I'm using Webpack to create that one single JavaScript file out of a set of JavaScript files that actually make the application. I'm going to gloss over that a little bit. So basically we have some HTML, we've got CSS, which I don't have open, but there's some CSS that designs all of that stuff. And then we have some Angular code that makes it all work. So for example, we have a controller, and I'm not going to go too far into what Angular is and how it works, but the controller is basically the logic. It's basically how do we make the HTML that's in the page react to what the user is doing, and sort of make things work. The first step in any Angular app is typically, at least on top of SharePoint, is typically, and I'm just going to run down to the initialize function, is to go and get a bunch of data. So I'm getting a configuration list. I'm getting the sourcing vendors, the vendors that we can place orders with. I'm getting my current user profile so that I know whether I'm an admin or not. I know some things about me. I'm getting the units of measure that people can use in their ordering. I'm getting the physical locations that we can order for, and which we're storing as a managed metadata term set. And then finally, I'm getting the requests and the orders that are open for display on that initial home page. To do that, I've got some services set up. So I'm going and I'm retrieving data from a couple of lists. I store the request, the REST requests in this thing that I call a factory. So for instance, when I go to get requests, I'm actually retrieving all of these different columns. Those are all columns that show up somewhere on that screen. And I'm sort of expanding the things that are linked to other columns, other lists, lookup columns and things like that. Orders, sort of similar. I'm getting vendors, I'm getting units of measure. So I define all of those REST calls here because I look at this as basically data. These requests are stored as URLs that are essentially data. The service that I have built up actually makes a call into that factory to get the parameters to do things like retrieve from the orders list, processes the data a little bit, passes it back to the controller. And then in that home page, we have what's called data binding. So we do things like, let me just find something that would be a reasonable example. So for instance, where are the headers here? So we're showing things like a button to assemble the order. I've built Angular, totally escaping me. I've built Angular controls that actually display a list of cards, a list of requests, or a list of orders. And within that function, within each of those, there's functionality that makes them do what they want to do. So I've talked a lot here, and I've shown you some code, but not a lot. The basic idea is that we're reflecting the business process. We're making sure that we can allow the end users to do the things that they want to do, and we're sitting on top of some data constructs. So we have, you should have probably seen that I had some lists and libraries that I was reading from, but what makes up this whole application is a set of six or eight different lists. In this case, we don't have a lot of documents, though there are some documents in the actual application. And these lists are related based on what I do in that code. So I connect requests to orders by putting an order number in the request, things like that. So if we were building this from sort of the end user perspective, we might start with this list. Here's a request. I want to do a new request. We'd see that same form because I'm using that form in the actual application. But we wouldn't be able to do anything with these requests to bundle them into orders. We wouldn't be able to do that very easily. We have a lot of one-to-many kinds of relationships, and that's where citizen developers often will get involved, where lists can't stand on their own. Now, lists that are providing lookup values to other lists certainly can. The management of those can feel okay. But when we're starting to manipulate the data and want to bundle them into things like requests and orders, into orders which are made up of multiple requests, like in this case, we'll usually have to write some code. So how did I do all of this? How much time did it take to do this? Well, one of the things that I typically try to do is not do a lot of requirements generation up front. Really building the thing becomes the requirements. I find that iterative approach, it's much more of an agile with a small a approach, is much more successful. We end up in a different place than we thought we might, but we solve the problem in the best way that we possibly can. So building this thing, the course, I probably built it over the course of a month and a half, something like that. But actual work might have been, it certainly was less than a week. But it was a decent chunk of time. So it was a bunch of work. You can see there are a bunch of code modules here. They're not small. There's a lot of custom work to do. As a citizen developer, this may well go way beyond your skills. This may be more than somebody inside a department can do. This is where that collaboration with IT would be awesome. But it's also a place where we can start to think about some third-party tools. And turning to third-party tools to try to solve some of these problems is why Attis is in on this webinar. It's why I joined the webinar for skybow, so that we can talk about, what if your citizen developers can't write this kind of JavaScript, can't take the solution this far? Well, there are third-party tools like Skybow that can really help to make that happen a lot more readily. So what Adis has done is actually looked at what I've built here and built very similar lists and libraries, and built a similar solution on top of SharePoint using Skybow. And I'm going to hand it over to Adis to show how he's done that. I think it's very impressive what he's come up with, and he'll talk about how much time it took him and what was involved to sort of mimic what I've done. Adis, are you ready?
I'm ready. Do you hear me? I think Marc doesn't hear me all the time, actually. Show my screen. Show screen. Hi, Marc. Can you hear me? Marc? So we are now this is definitely the situation where you see that Marc and me are not professional webcasters. We are developers, because obviously Marc can't hear me right now.
Ah, yes. I just figured out why it was so quiet.
Yes, I actually did try to ask you questions. You doesn't hear me. It's all fine.
I'm sorry. I just was talking and talking. I thought you were being very quiet and respectful. That wasn't it. It was just me being an idiot with the button.
No, and I mean, you know that me being respectful, that's sometimes very funny things to do. So, can you just confirm you see the site contents of the very same site you have showed me on the screen, Marc?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So as Marc said, Marc showed me this sourcing applications application like 2-3 weeks ago when we were preparing this webinar. I was like, okay, it took him a few weeks. Let me, for a fun, try to make the application which will do pretty much the same thing used in Skybow Solution Studio. As I mentioned in the very beginning, that's our platform for building solutions on top of SharePoint for both for citizen developers and professional developers to see how much would it come into. I will in advance tell you immediately it took me less than 1.5 work days to build what I'm going to show you guys now, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it, so you can understand why why it took so little time basically on that one. Marc gave me access to his site, so I just shamelessly copy-pasted all the listed libraries that Marc said ahead. As you see, I have the very same listed libraries with orders. This is my orders library. I'm coming to that one very soon. I have also the requests where I'm I have a list of my requests which are being assembled to orders. And I also have the stuff like locations, like categories, like units of measure, vendors, and everything that Marc has been showing to us. So from this one, I'm actually going to start a request to show the very same application as Marc was doing. I will be showing you in the meantime how I did it. This is our skybow Solution Studio. So as you see here, I was not aiming for the full UI parity, but I was aiming for the full solution parity and functionality parity with what Marc has done. I'm here also an administrator, so I can see both my requests and requests from all the others. I can very easily filter those requests to only to those which are already being placed in the orders. They are not such as which are assembled. As you see, there are some of the assembled, or those who are submitted and not yet placed into an order. As you see here, there is Marc. We have a threshold of $10,000 US, where we said each order which was submitted with more than $10,000 should have a warning sign that it goes to approval. We could also build an approval process for this one, but for now we have just an order sign. We have here information panel about all of these orders, exactly as Marc have showed us, and we have here an icon which shows us on a visual way in which state this order is. This is submitted. This is those are being received, and we have somewhere those being assembled. Exactly, those are those being assembled. So we have basically the same functionality as Marc has been showing in the beginning. We can very easily, as you see, navigate through this. On the left side, and this is going to go to the whole application, to the whole solution, we have the menu. For the user who is going to use this, actually navigation and undertaking actions are the same thing. User does not want to have 2 points of interaction with this application, it's one. That's the reason we have the menu here, which can be making new requests or ordering or overview orders, but basically some of those are just navigational link and some of them are really performing actions on data, but all are sorted at this one place. If you switch to skybow Solution Studio, this is exactly what I have. There is 0 lines of code here. We use the components in skybow Solution Studio using action links for building the menu. This is the action link components. We use the standard SharePoint data list viewer, and we use skybow list view search to actually make those filtering. We can change those filters as you want, drag and drop all of them, or fine tune them with all different ways we want to do, add new fields for filtering or whatever we want to. On the left side, we see one thing, which is make a new request. If we open this action link, we see this is skybow action link builder. Still, there is no code. We are just configuring stuff. This is what Marc was telling, configuring versus configuring and coding, but there is this gray line. Here is still configuring. I'm just say here, hey, I want to open a list form on current side. It's a new form for my requests list. So if I click here and click on make a new request, I am getting exactly the same list new form as Marc was saying. Just Marc, you don't really need to wait for Power Apps. If you would actually open that new form here in skybow Solution Studio, you can see that you can really drag and drop fields as you like, make them smaller or nicer, or format them like here we are going to see it right now. So basically you have a full control over look and feel and calculation of this form. As you see here, my location is immediately read as Germany, since this is my user profile field from in skybow directory, since I am based in Germany. I can choose a category here. I can say, hey, it's office supplies. I am using staples as a vendor, item catalog number, staples, whatever that might be, item name, USB sticks, 64 gigabytes. I hope they're still in sale. So we still have date of recipient when we want to have date requested. What we see here, we have here units of measure. I say this is going to be each. Unit price is going to be $10 for a stick. And I say here we need 100 of those. So you see, I have an extended price immediately calculated to 1,000. If I open here to see how did I get this price, we can see here that in extended price, I have just put a formula as a calculation value, which says, hey, my extended price is just quantity multiplied with unit price. As simple as that. Yeah.
You can hear me, so I'm going to interrupt you.
Do that.
One of the things that I really like, and I wanted to just stop you and point out, is that you're hopping around within one tool set rather than, like you mentioned Power Apps. So you're not hopping over into Power Apps and then back into SharePoint.
It's all inside the Skybow Solution Studio.
Right. So that I think that's a big plus to your platform, is that you build things in this solution, in this studio, and you understand. Once you understand it, you understand all of these bits and pieces, which is awesome.
Yes, basically we call this internally, we call those things accelerators, but are basically components from the Solution Studio. It is Form Designer is obviously a huge part of that. The whole business logic, which I have showed you, those expressions, is a huge part of that. The whole action links, which makes the process management, is a huge part of it. But we have much more. I'm going to show some more of those. And yes, as you said, they are all part of one tool set. Which we give actually to both citizen developers. As you see, all what I did until now, it's really for citizen developers. For example, what we did here, I have now $1,000. If I change this to 1,000 and I change this to 11, my accepted value is $11,000. And you see, because I have a threshold of 10,000, it's immediately written approval needed. So how did we get this one? It's very simple. If I go here and actually open, I just put a label here called approval needed, and I'm saying, hey, show this approval needed label only if my extended price is larger than 10,000. So this is basically the level of what we are doing here. This is literally a few configuration lines of code. I'm not going to stop to stay on this form for too long. You obviously see that this works as it should work. I'm just going to save our new USB sticks, and here after we have added the new, so it's here. Obviously, I did not order it overnight. You have 11,000 here. You will notice that there is no info panel on the left side still. Why is it that? Because this info panel is calculated in the background. We have something called the background calculations using SharePoint terms and SharePoint things like webhooks in the background, but you as citizen developer don't really need to see this thing. You just need to set here in the background calculations of the requests lists. I'm not going to save anything here. We have a thing called things in background where I say, hey, each time when I have changes on my data set, in this case is my calculating my information panel, info panel. I have background calculation, which says, depending on the data here, please create me an info panel status. Now, these are few lines of JavaScript, and this is where we might or agree or disagree, is this still citizen development or not? Because I witnessed that even citizen developers are most of the time able, at least those who can, let's say, fairly good work with Excel or similar tools, fairly able to write small JavaScript snippets. This one is just creating an info panel, which here, when you hover over this, you are getting information about this stuff. So you don't have to write webhooks. You don't need to know how to write webhooks. It's enough that you know what you want to do, and using Solution Studio, Skybow Solution Studio, and these background calculations, and we have quite some of those, actually to create this stuff. But let me shortly walk you through the process, and then we can open the questions there. I can also from here go assemble order. This is just like what Marc did in sourcing. We see the very same list, but only for those where orders are not yet placed, being assembled. So only where the status is still submitted. So I can really submit, check together a few, check together a few of those requests, and I can click assemble order, and I'm getting a nice warning. Hey, it doesn't work. Really, please choose the vendor. As Marc said, hey, we need to have one vendor per order. So I'm going to choose here staples. I have obviously four staples items. As you see, this item, our USB 64 gigs, has been background calculated in the meantime as we were speaking. So I'm choosing 3 of those, and I'm saying, hey, let's now assemble this order. By assembling this order, vendor has been recognized, PO number has been created by some of our logic which we have. We have to choose the order date. We could also put this to be actually today's date, but I, for example, didn't. With saving this, we will see that those items actually do disappear from here. And if I go now to orders overview, I'm going to see this new assembled order from Staples being here. This is an assembled order from Staples from today by Adis Jugo being here. We see the extended price is not yet calculated. We are using those background calculations also for this thing, but I can still open this order and overview its status. I have those 3 items. We see here that the order is in assembled mode. I can quickly switch between those items to see what exactly has been done here, what's not being done here. Some point of time when I reload, I will also be getting the extended price. It's not yet there, and I can even print the order sheet just to see here. This is also one of the parts of the skybow functionality. We can actually generate reports and documents based on your SharePoint data. As you see, this is my newly assembled order. Total has not yet been calculated in the background, but I actually created a report based on this one. As the next step in the order, in the order processing, the next step would be, as Marc has shown. Okay, now we have an extended price calculated also in the meantime. We can also place the order. You see that this is my next point which I can do. I could also delete this order since this is it's not yet placed. I could delete, say, hey, this order, this was a wrongly assembled order. I can delete it and then reassemble the new one. But I'm going actually to place the order. At this time, when I'm placing the order, remember the Marc's form from before. I can say, hey, expect date. It is, I don't know, let's say 1st of November, vendor's order number. It's some of them. And as you see, after page has been reloaded, I have a placed order. When I have a placed order, now I can't anymore delete order, obviously, since it's placed. I can't also place it because it is placed. Usually in production, I would make these fields I would make these links invisible. For the sake of this demo, I made it just disabled. All what I can do here is mark it as received when the order has been arrived, or again print the order sheet, which will, in this case, when I print it, you see we have also totals properly set. When I put it, when I mark it as received, we will see that we are now on the end of the process with the orders. Order has been received and we are all set. Let me just show you shortly how this all has been done, how fast we are going. I'm going now here to this. Now, before I do that, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show again to the all items. I'm going to discard the change which I had until now. And there's one thing. When I see here assemble order, it's basically just transferring us to this site here for the sourcing, for assembling the order. It's just a normal view. But if you click here on this gear icon, you will see that I can set this link be enabled or visible. This link is visible only for the users who are members of the SharePoint group managers. So yes, I have here, if I go to site settings and show me please, SharePoint, people and groups, I'm going to open my groups here. I do have a group managers and I'm a member of that group. For that reason, I'm actually able to see those links. Otherwise, I would not be even able to see this link. It wouldn't be shown to me. So, but once I'm in the sourcing area, this is where I actually assemble all this stuff. You recognize all the same elements. We have the search, we have the action links, we have the different view for sourcing. Important stuff here is actually assembling the order. Well, the first one is easy. We are adding a list item. This is just a skybow action. A normal citizen developer can do that without any hassle. We choose the site, we choose the list. It's an order list. We are assembling new order, and put some data into the order list. So now there's a script here, which is actually showing us how the orders have been assembled. You see now here, this is not something a citizen developer can actually do. This is a thing for professional developer to say, hey, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm using SharePoint JavaScript object model, and I'm choosing a specific SharePoint data to actually select few of those items from here. Yeah, those are those items. I'm going to here to assemble order.
I think that some citizen developers can do any of this, right? You know, when we say a citizen developer can't do this or they wouldn't be able to do that, it all depends on the person, right?
True, but let's say a person who is really proficient in Excel, I would not expect from that person to actually be capable of doing this. But this is where citizen developer and professional developer work hand in hand, because citizen developer actually know what she wants to do. And when she wants to put the data structures together and put all the process together, it's actually fairly simple for her to call the professional developer, say, please, can you just write me the logic? In this simple case, can you just write me the logic to actually assemble this order? You see here, for professional developer, it is literally here like 20, 30 lines of code. It's a very simple one. And even for those guys of you who are professional developers, you see that I did no plumbing here. I am in SharePoint context. I did not need to reference thousands of libraries or whatever. I'm using JavaScript. I have JavaScript and jQuery referenced for me. I could reference here Angular or Knockout or whatever I would like to reference if I want something else. But there, I want to show you a few things here. You have your SharePoint data literally on the right side of you, very easily accessing it without any further plumbing. Your context has been done and prepared for you by Skybow Solution Studio. You basically just need to use it and to do this stuff. After that, we just open a form where user needs to confirm few information and reload the page. This part of code here is actually, sorry, the wrong one. This part of code here in executing this script is actually the most complex script, the most complex piece of code we have here. I will just shortly go to orders because we are slowly running out of time, and I want to leave few things for the few minutes for the questions. We have here, for example, things like place order or delete order. In place order, I basically see that I do only one thing. I'm updating one list item to placed. Everything else has been then calculated for me in the background, and all the stuff has been calculated for me in background. Interesting one is really here when I say, hey, print order sheet. One of the actions I have in Skybow Solution Studio is generate document. You are actually basically able to generate Word documents out of Word document templates. In this case, I'm generating for single item, which is my order, my single order item. I could also generate it for all orders just to get an order overview. This is my item, and I open it in browser. I can even give it some nice name, order title docx. So let me show you how this template actually looks like. This is my template. As you see, this is a normal docx file, purchase order from in Microsoft Word. When I'm putting these placeholders, they're actually recognized later by Skybow Solution Studio when generating the document. We see here we have a table loop. We are looping to the requests in the order. We are putting the extended price on the end, and we are then on the end of the day generating this list. As a gimmick, here in the orders, I actually put another thing which I have like in scheduled actions. Let's say I'm uploading this document. I could also upload this document in any document library, not only open it or download it. I could actually store it in document library. And then I created a scheduled actions. When I say, hey, report placeholders to the manager, when I say, please, each Monday, go to the orders, find those who have order status placed. I could also delete this condition, but I want only the placed orders. Go to schedule. Well, it's not Monday, it's a monthly schedule. The first, always on the first day of the month, in 10 o'clock. I'm going to send an email to this person and to send this document, which I forgot here to attach, but I could do that. And I'm actually sending this document to my manager every 1st of October, kind of a timer job in old SharePoint on premises, which is sending the email to my manager. I have multiple actions here which I can do. I am here sending mails. I could also add new items, delete list items, send emails. We are adding those actions as we speak. We are always developing on the Solution Studio. But this is basically the whole solution I have around this. All of this, including styling, and styling I actually did with another skybow component, which is called Skybow Theme Designer. It's a very simple component where you basically create a theme. It's a SharePoint add-in installed in the site. Will be part of Solution Studio soon. I can just, for example, edit the theme which I have currently. I'm opening this theme, and I'm going to actually, as we click, change the colors and change the look and feel of this application. As you see here, I don't have here ribbon bars. I don't have any standard quick launch. I have a very clean and polished interface which guides user from A to B, from left to right in the whole order process. In the meantime, I have this open. I can look at the resulting CSS, which is implemented in the page, or I can go to the page designer and select any element. And you see here, okay, I selected the row here. I have selected row. I have alternating row, and I can easily set the colors, set the fonts, and set the sizes, set whatever I want. Just for fun here, for example, I don't want to have it dark gray. I want to make it pink or magenta, and now I have a gray magenta SharePoint interface. On the end of the day, Marc was developing on his own environment, and he deployed probably the list definitions and his CSS code to his customer. We would obviously do the same here. We have a publish and package process. I'm going to show you the finished one since it will take too much time for this webinar. I created a package from everything that I have in here. And what can a package contain? Basically everything. List and library definitions, even list and library data. For example, if we have 200 vendors for the sourcing, I don't want to copy this 200 vendors list from one environment to another environment. I actually I don't want to type it 2 or even 3 times. So it all can be packaged. You can go to any package and show and look here in the logs what has actually been packaged for this list. You see here all the list definitions, all the list contents, and all the customizations we did on forms, on actions, on reports, on whatever. It all has been inside. Once the package has been done, I can go to the publishing process. I have no deployments of this application as for now. I can just say, hey, deploy this to new site. I can say new deployment. I would choose a version. I have only one. I would put the destination site, do the verification and deployment site, and the whole package would be deployed to the target site. If I would have version 1.0.1 or 2.0, the system is able to find the delta between deployed version and new version, and just to deploy the differences to the target site. So when you do an upgrade or an update of the application, it is actually then very, very easy to deploy those changes which you have had. On the end of the day, as I said, I did not really seek for the feature for the UI parity with Marc. I don't have a card interface here, but I did seek for a feature parity, and I think Marc, you can tell me, but I think in 1.5 days I pretty much achieved the feature parity.
Yeah, and as I told you when we were prepping for this, I'm impressed that you can get this far so fast with this tool set. I mean, it's incredible. It's certainly an awesome alternative for people who find that, you know, my approach is writing too much code?
Well, we call it tool for citizen devs and for professional devs for a reason, because as you see, as a citizen dev, you can get really far with this tool. But then again, you are going at some point of time to eventually, not always, but very often, to actually hit a deadline, to hit a dead end where you cannot actually go on, and where you actually cannot go further, and you are going to ask for help. And this is perfectly in line with what you were saying, Kate. Those business, under quotation marks, you don't see me making virtual quotation mark with my fingers. So business and IT actually needing and having to work together. Maybe even IT can take ownership of this at some point of time, but business user can actually start with this and ask for help for a professional developer for this simple piece of code here, which we see here with assembling the order. So there is no exclusivity here. For professional developers, they can also use this stuff very easily for not having really to paint their forms from the scratch. They can use the things as I had, for example, use the display form here in the orders view. As you can see here, I can have as much forms as I want just in the old SharePoint Designer. I can be adding new forms or doing whatever I want. But you see here, this is the whole form designer here is drag and drop level. You can use tabs. I'm just adding new tab called Marc, and I can even just take the data from here. I'm going to take the order date and just to drop it into the Marc tab, literally in 2 clicks. And I can even then go to the Marc. This was the. So I'm going to Marc and I say, hey, show me this Marc tab visible only if my current user, and if I go to my current user, you see that I'm getting all the properties about my current user. I actually have my SharePoint context as a developer. I have all the info of my SharePoint context that I might have. In this case, I'm just going for example, for the office, and I say, hey, show this thing only if this guy is actually from Germany. It's basically as simple for that. So for me, this thing Marc is going to be visible for Bart, who is with our good fairy waiting in the background to collect the questions. You guys can ask the questions already in the questions box. Bart has his location set for Netherlands because he's living in Amsterdam, and he would not be in this case able to see this tab. But you see how fast did we create the tab and how fast did this whole thing, the form design, for example, goes.
You know, I think it's interesting because I think this is really the future of systems development. I think that we will see over time, and this has been going on for decades, but we will see it accelerate now, where we're seeing tools like this, where people can do the majority of the work on a system without writing any code, and then the professional developers, and I use air quotes around that whenever I say it, can come in and fix the parts that you know, fix the gaps. And I think we're going to see more and more of this as time goes on. We're seeing it with SharePoint. We're seeing it with products like yours here with Skybow. And I think that that's a good thing, because what it does is it gets us to solutions faster that more readily match the business need. And that's
if you remember, and I know that you remember Visual Basic from 90s, where Microsoft came up with the whole, hey, let's design the form and then write the code behind. We have these attempts really even in the professional developer world since 20, 30 years in the meantime. So this is really nothing new. This is, I would dare to say, even if it's our product, I would dare to say this is the first comprehensive attempt to do this on SharePoint as a platform.
Yeah, we're way over time, but I did want to. There are a couple of questions that I'll read to you, and you can answer because they're more about Skybow. Are you planning to support responsive forms?
Yes, we are actually working on that one. We are actually working on modern interfaces, and we are going to present our roadmap very soon, and we are going to have something for you guys on the modern interfaces and modern pages and modern list in medium term, because it's a lot of work. It's totally different rendering engine, but yes, we are on it.
Cool. Another question for you. Does this form tool have the ability to create post-save actions, like sending an email after saving?
Yes, very much, and I can even show you one of those. And
you actually did touch on that somewhere.
Yes, I'm just shortly going to go to the request forms, and this was actually here in sourcing. If I go now to the sourcing thing, and this is not an only form thing. Form is an important part of it, but it's way more than form. But if you say, hey, ensemble order, you see here I have 5 steps. One is select vendor. One is list item. One is execute script, open list form, and the last one is the load page. I'm just going to add another one, but not put it before the load page, which I will say send email. And I'm going to say from me, Adis Jugo at skybow.com to, I'm going to take a current user here. I'll just put the same one here. To current user here, subject, new request, and I will be going to the message, and I'm going to say, hey, there is a new request. And I could also even build this much more comprehensive to see who put requests for this location, whatever, but I guess you guys get the idea. It's click together thing. We don't have to write a single line of code for that.
Couple more questions for you. If a SharePoint Online implementation uses a branding package, will this cause a problem for skybow Designer?
No. No, we are actually, in 2 weeks, we have a webinar with our good friends from Valo. They are an internet company. They have make intranet out of the box. And we are going to show how this works perfectly, for example, for their very beautiful custom designs.
Cool. And then there's one more question. The issue about, and this is a good one. The issue about this way of development is how do you maintain the applications? Do you have a plan how to deal with this problem? The definition of maintenance is a good one. I actually showed you the whole ALM process which we have here. So, for example, I created here a V1. I have changed some things, so I can create new package here. It's immediately offering me here 0001. I can change it to 5. However, we added new fields. Doesn't really matter. It's now going to take 1 to 2 minutes to generate new packages. We're just going to generate the deltas. But we did create the ALM process with this one. We do support packages, deployments, targeted deployments, and targeted updates. With targeted updates, it's more to say we never delete things. We do add new stuff, we do change stuff, we never delete stuff. For example, if you have added 2 new fields in a list and changed the type of another field from text to multi-line and deleted one field and you deploy that update being here, actually what's going to happen, you will get 2 new fields, you will get the change if change is possible. For example, you can change from text to multi-line, but you cannot change from text to lookup. That will not be obviously possible, but we are never going to delete your data. So this is something if you want to really delete in the target, you are going to do it yourself manually. But we do support operations in the full ALM cycle. We even have a nice YouTube video. Whatever we do here, we actually have YouTube where my colleague Matthias. If I could just type properly, that would be skybow. While you're trying to find that, I think one of the things that people, the IT folks tend to complain about is that the citizen developers don't understand proper ALM or software development lifecycle or whatever. You give them some of the tools right here that they would need, but they still have to be able to think that way. And I think that's where the partnership between IT and the citizen developers is really important.
Yes, and this is why we are giving these tools to both of them to actually be able to create those packages. For example, just imagine you started, I need to stop this now. For example, imagine you started to create a solution, Marc, and you are a citizen dev, and now you needed the help from the professional dev. How do you do that usually? So what we did, for example, here, because those people are usually inside the same organization, so I can say here, just share solution, and I can share with more people, or I'm going to share just with one person, and I'm going to give all data to Bart Vessels at skybow.com. And Bart is now a professional developer. And in this case, he's getting a message that he's also the solution owner, and he can help me directly on this solution without us copying files back and forth.
Right. And then
package the whole thing.
Yep, this is a problem with my approach too. And in the past, what we've done is we've created maybe a site collection that holds all the code so that the IT folks can look into it. I mean, the ways you can do this stuff, do sort of the application lifecycle management stuff technically is one question, but then the mindset and the collaboration is another phase, and that all of that stuff is really about people talking to each other and working together well, not about the technology.
Yes, but you need still to give them the tools to do that. You know,
That's
maybe you as a citizen dev don't really understand the ALM cycle, and you think, hey, I'm building it on my production site, so why shouldn't I? Maybe why shouldn't you if you are the only site owner? But maybe Bart wants to use that as well, or whoever wants to use that as well. So you give me, as an IT person, actually through this capability here, option to work with you on that one, and I actually know something about Thailand. So I, as another person, I am actually then going to create those packages and to manage the deployments on the way that they should be properly managed on the ALM way.
Yeah. No, this is awesome stuff. I would love to just keep talking to you for hours more, but I think we're starting to lose people to other meetings. So maybe we should wrap this up.
Luckily, they all are going to get an email with the recording.
Right. There's only one other question on the list here. Mobile support with responsive forms is a must. When is it coming? I think you already answered that, but
I actually did. It's coming in the next month.
Right.
Because it's definitely it's a major step. It's an important thing for us to do. We are on it, but this is not something that you do in 2 days.
Yeah. You want to do it right.
Yes, or don't do it at all. Okay. Hey, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marc, for leading this webinar.
This was fun. I really enjoyed watching how you built this. I got to see a few times along the way as Adis was able to build it over the last week or so. Clock time. It didn't take him that long. And it's pretty amazing what you can do with this tool set. I still love my way of working. I think it's got a place, but I think that from a citizen developer standpoint, this skybow tool set is definitely something to look at.
Marc, I would never see it like I would never see it like either or. It's end.
Right, exactly. And you know me well enough, Adis, that I wouldn't be saying that unless I actually believed it. I'm impressed with the tool set, and that's why I'm here.
And I'm reading comments that people telling us, I enjoyed this very much. Thank you, and it makes us happy if you guys have enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, and of course, if anyone has questions about anything we showed, I'm happy to answer questions via Twitter, email, whatever. Yep. And I'm sure you are too, Adis.
Marc and me are fun to work with, so just shoot the questions on or Twitter or in any of the conferences or events that Marc and me being around, and we are there to answer the questions. Hey, thank you, everyone. And we will need to repeat this, Marc, at some point of time.
Thanks a lot, Adis.
Bye.